Welcome to this presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Welcome to Late to the Party, a program on the Paper Street Pictures Podcast Network. Your hosts for the following proceedings are yours truly. My name is Shawn Talley. Joining me to duel, to rhyme, to challenge me to a battle of the wits, perhaps. He is a fellow member of the Paper Street Pictures production team. He is Mr. Cameron Burns. How goes it, Cameron?
It's going good, man. I'm in Toronto. I just wrapped a show I was on and getting a much needed couple days off. So I'm excited to have gotten to sleep in and jump right into recording a podcast. Exciting times.
Indeed, this one's a unique one, which we'll explain later. But your guest is someone you've been in contact with and gave up a good movie choice for this one. So you want to explain the long and short of the premise of this program?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you've never listened before, first of all, welcome. Second of all, why? Third of all, go back and listen to all the other ones and give us like a super good review, because real podcasts always tell people to give 5-star reviews. And we're pretending to be a real podcast. So, so the way the show works is we find someone we like and we want to have a conversation with. And we ask them, hey, what's your biggest blind spot movie? What's that movie that you haven't seen, that everyone in the world has seen, and you feel dumb when it comes up that you haven't seen it, and like this big zeitgeisty movie that just floors people that you haven't seen. And like the crazy thing is pretty much everybody has that. And so we decide to, instead of hiding it, to celebrate the idea of the movie you haven't seen. And so we bring somebody on, we chat for a minute about why they haven't seen it and what they think it's about, and then we send them on their way to watch the movie, and then we bring them back and we talk about it after. And so that's kind of the thing we do here.
Yeah, and to Cameron's point, he's mentioned this before, that everybody has these blind spots. It is a straight numbers game. Whether you're one of the most avid cinephiles on earth, you just haven't had enough time to watch everything. There's going to be a blind spot, or like a genre you've not really tackled, be it action or giallo or westerns or something, or certain foreign films you might have blind spots of. And it's funny to some of the guests we've reached out to, like there's major movies, like we're looking for like the Forrest Gumps and the Titanics and stuff like that. The Princess Brides even, which we're always amazed when somebody hasn't seen a movie that ubiquitous and that in the culture. So
would you say it's nearly inconceivable that he hasn't seen that?
I think that's a very good callback to the movie. One of the most known quotes of it, if not the most known, next to "My name is Inigo Montoya," and you know the rest. Most of you know the rest. I can't imagine many don't. I would imagine Chris has even heard that line. We'll find out here shortly. But yes, Princess Brides is one of those ones that we talked about just as a, Lion King, Jurassic Park, and those kind, like when we were coming up with like, what's a good kind of movie that's a perfect one for the show. And we have found a gentleman who worked on the shoot with you named Chris Ball. And we're going to bring him on here in a moment and ask him why he has never seen The Princess Bride. Joining us for this episode, a filmmaker, someone who cut their teeth in the art department on films including The Adam Project and The Revenant, and a producer on films like Stillborn, What Keeps You Alive, and Summerland, which he also co-wrote as well. He is Cameron's new BFF after a recent shoot in the Great White North. He is Chris Ball. Chris, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I can confirm for anybody paying attention, the 8 people listening, that Chris is my new movie BFF. Ashley Sneed has now moved to second. She's not happy about it, but these things happen.
Yeah, and one more thing about our guest here. Mr. Ball has never seen the 1987 film The Princess Bride.
That is true, unfortunately.
Shame.
Well, we'll get into the how and why of that, but you came about as a guest on this program after Cameron, I think, mentioned the show's premise to you while working on this particular shoot in question, and you saying that was one of the movies you'd not seen. He texted me that movie, and I wrote back to him in all caps, book him right now. And so here we are, as this is one of those ubiquitous movies I feel like the world has seen, and again, even younger folks, it seems like it's passed down a few generations. So you want to give us a heads up on maybe why you never saw this one?
Yeah, I was it's always been in my orbit, obviously, because I think it was one of those things where it was so popular. Like I sort of missed that window when I was a kid to see it. And then so of course when I got older, it was like always talked about, and all my friends had seen it, and everyone had seen it. It was just I never had the opportunity to like really, I'm not going to go and watch it like alone. And so it was just, I feel like I just missed that window. And also I just remembered this memory this morning. Because I was trying to think like, why hadn't I never seen it? And I had this memory of my older brother watching it with his friend or his girlfriend or something. And I remember thinking it was silly when I was a kid, because I didn't know that it was supposed to be funny. So, and I feel like a movie like this, again, I've not seen it. I don't know a whole lot about it. I mean, I know enough about it, but I feel like if you don't know it's supposed to be funny, like, and you're like 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever I was, like, I thought it was just so silly. So I think that was part of it too.
So you kind of hit on a little bit of like, this movie is super well known. I mean, you could find Princess Bride t-shirts at Walmart and Target. Like, this is a movie that is just like attacked the lexicon. So what do you know of the movie? Do you have like kind of a good feel about, you answered this a little bit, but do you have kind of like a good feel about what it's about and what it's trying to do? Or I guess, how much do you know of the movie?
Yeah, so I know it's supposed to be, I don't know if a parody is the right word, like a parody or a satire. And it's like a princess story, like a prince trying to find a princess. I have no idea if this is even what it's about, but I know that it's supposed to be funny, and that it is like there's a couple famous scenes that I sort of know about, like like I know kind of about the poison scene, but only so much as everyone talks about it and like will quote it. And so I've heard countless people of my friends and people in my orbit like quote the movie, but I have no context for what it's about. I've never really seen clips of it. Like, I have sort of vague memories, like I said, of like, I can picture the characters and the actors in costumes. I can picture when like I said, when I saw my brother watching it for the first time, and I just thought it was silly and I didn't know what it was. So like that's sort of the extent of it. I've just heard everybody talk about it, but I've never really seen anything from it.
When your friends would quote it, would you like chuckle like you knew what was happening, or did you just like glare at them like, yeah, I'm not buying it?
Well, there's like the one quote, like the inconceivable, which is just, I have no context. So I would just join in. Cause I mean, really, for the longest time, I just like, it felt like I had seen it. Like, it was just, all my friends would talk about it all and quote it. It was just one of those, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably one of the most quotable movies on your list. So I would just pretend that I had seen it sometimes, just to not have to go through that shame process of all my friends shaming me for not seeing it.
Yeah, that's fair. You did deserve shame, so I can see why you would hide and not take your shame. But yeah, it's so I'm a little upset that you do know a little bit about it. It would have been great to me as if you just started talking about some movie that is like not at all this. But yeah, you
see the Anne Hathaway movie, right? Princess Diaries. I've seen this one.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you like. I kind of wish you had just started talking about some movie that this wasn't. So when we watched it, he would be like, "Oh no, we need to re-record the beginning." But no such luck. It seems like you have kind of a vague idea of what's going on here and what this movie is. So yeah, it is supposed to be funny. Let's I was
gonna say he's halfway there now that he knows as an adult it does lean into comedy. It's not even you'll know that kind of early on. Even the poster originally had a tagline that was like, not your basic, average, everyday, ordinary, run-of-the-mill ho-hum fairy tale. Like it was cheeky. It was leaning into it. And again, I think it'll be clear watching that now.
It's kind of incredible then that like when I saw bits of it, like when I was a kid, like that I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was supposed to be funny. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, it's like I've sort of had no idea what I'm going into, but it is weird that I remember not knowing that it was supposed to be funny.
Kids are really dumb. That's
that would come off as camp. To his point, he watched something that came off silly because he wasn't understanding it was supposed to be a comedy. So I could see that being campy and cheesy. I won't say the movie's not cheesy. We all certainly have nostalgia goggles for this one, but like I do know that this one holds up more than most 80s movies. Like it's a lot closer to a Back to the Future in that you can show somebody cold with modern eyes this movie and they'll take to it way more than some of the ones that are much more dated, like maybe Neverending Story and Monster Squad and stuff that might not hold up as well. And those are movies I like too. I'm not slighting those movies, but yeah, I have high hopes that you'll respond, I think, to this one just because it is kind of endlessly charming. It is one of the most beloved movies, I would argue, of our lifetimes.
It is also written by probably the greatest screenwriter in the history of screenwriting. So we got
Steven Seagal.
Steven Seagal. Oh man, I can't wait. Like sidebar here, that was William Goldman, right? That's his name. Yeah, William Goldman.
Yes.
I can't wait to do a Steven Seagal movie on this podcast. We should prioritize a Steven Seagal movie.
Does he have one that's like so universally in the culture we can even do?
Who cares? Who cares? You're overthinking it, Shawn. I just want to do a Steven Seagal movie.
It's got to be Under Siege with Tommy Lee Jones, right? I think that's probably That's the one where they're on the boat or the train?
Yep.
It's a
Die Hard
train,
on a
isn't it?
battleship. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, Under
yeah.
Siege 2 is the train. Under Siege 2 is Dark Territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, part one, he faces down Gary Busey and Tommy Lee Jones in part one.
My
Yeah.
God. We should do a whole episode, like a whole series of like Seagal movies, like the month of Seagal. Shawn, are you writing this down?
Oh, I'm not. No, I'm going to try to stick somewhat to the premise of the show. And in that vein, like I think we've kind of covered enough of the why. Chris hasn't gotten to it, but it sounds like he's into watching it. This is a unique situation where you two are in the same vicinity, and there's a chance you might be watching it in the same room in the interim here.
That is correct. We're not together now. He is at a separate location now, and we will record separately, but we are going to watch the movie together. But I promise not to laugh or give away whether I'm liking it or not.
Start like silently quoting along with it. He's like, "Shut the fuck up, Cameron."
No, I'm going to be good.
All right, yeah. Save all the commentary for the post watch here. So
all business.
Yep, absolutely.
There you go. Well, let's wrap it up here and then get to watching it. And we will return in just a moment here to the listeners' ears here to get Chris's thoughts on the film and much more. So stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Hey there, welcome back. What was mere seconds for you, the listener, was a good deal more for us. When we last left off, our guest Chris Ball had not seen The Princess Bride. He was late to the party, but at least he got here, and we welcome him back, a more cultured individual, a more learned film viewer, a person who has done the inconceivable, if you will, and watched the 1987 film The Princess Bride. Chris, do you feel any or all of these things?
I do. I don't know how I went so long without seeing that movie. It's inconceivable.
Indeed. And we mentioned at the top, this was a unique situation where you physically sat in the same room as Cameron and caught this. And Cam, were you true to your word? Did you keep your lips sealed and not just start quoting lines and giving him tidbits and like trivia?
I was maybe once or twice. Did I do one of those things? But I tried to be on my best behavior and let him enjoy the majesty of Princess Bride without any interference from me.
I heard him whispering a couple lines as they were going, but it was okay. It was all in good fun.
It was all Fezzik's rhymes. And then he starts mumbling like, did you know that 93,000 people watched him get slammed by Hulk Hogan at the Silverdome in 19-something?
He did. Chris did go, who is that guy? I was like, that's Andre the Giant. He goes, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I was like, okay. So not a wrestling guy. More.
Yeah, no worries. Nobody, even people who don't know wrestling, kind of remember the Hogan Andre stuff just from cultural osmosis, I guess. But let's jump in then. I guess the initial macro thoughts on it, Chris. Like, what was your reaction to it? You said you had a sort of idea what it was from childhood. You remembered it kind of being funny, but you didn't realize at the time. So, what was your impression watching it? How did it take to you?
I was surprised at how much of its own movie that it is. Like I guess I was expecting for some reason more satire or more parody, almost like The Naked Gun or something in that vein. But it was actually its own movie with its own story and characters, and like it was sort of magical in its own way. And I wasn't expecting that. Like it was pretty, I would say pretty magical experience.
So by the end, you were okay with it being a kissing book?
Yeah. So, well, I wasn't expecting it to, I guess for some reason I was expecting it to just be all parody. And I wasn't expecting I wasn't expecting it to be that good, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Fair. It is. Now I'm allowed to say it is a great movie. One of my all-time favorites and one of everyone in the world's all-time favorites, I think. But yeah, I get that. I can see how from the outside, having just seen a little bit of it, you could think it's a little more of a satire than it actually is. I mean, I think it soft satires some stuff here and there, but yeah, it's its own movie. It's on its own wavelength. And yeah, I could see how you would get to that. And you said something yesterday while we were talking about it a little bit, like right after viewing it, that was something that I remembered a long time ago, is you thought basically the first half of the movie was the whole movie, like where he's running from the three bad guys and all that stuff. And I remember as a kid thinking that was a much bigger part of the movie. And then about halfway through, it does like that bait and switch where they kind of team up. But I had a very similar thing when I was a kid where I didn't realize that there is much more movie after he runs from the three guys.
Yeah, I was expecting because like I told you before, I had that memory when I was a kid of like watching like some scene or something, and it was from the first half of the movie that I remembered where I didn't know that it was supposed to be funny, so I thought it was silly. And yeah, my memory was like I thought the whole movie was him going up against each of the bad guys, like Andre the Giant, and then Wallace Shawn. And there's a whole other movie. There's a whole other second half of the movie. So I wasn't expecting that. And also everyone in the movie plays it straight. Like no one, like even no matter how ridiculous and how funny it is, like everyone's playing it straight. And I think that's why Cary Elwes is so good in it, because he's just like he delivers every line with a straight face, which is so funny. And I think that's what makes it so good.
I feel like Billy Crystal was the only person in the movie who knew it was a comedy. Like Billy Crystal's out there doing shtick, but everyone else is playing it like very straight. Billy Crystal can get away with it because he's Billy Crystal, but like he's the only guy who seems like he's going for laughs.
Which is funny because that was my least favorite scene. That's which I thought was when it goes like a little campy and sort of it's you're right. It's because Billy Crystal's like embracing the silliness. That was actually my least favorite scene.
That's interesting you say that. Yeah. The stories, the legends that come out of that set were that he got on set for 3 days and just had the crew howling and ruining takes with laughter to where like Rob Reiner himself was almost vomiting laughing. So, and the story was that he never repeated the same joke twice. So it would be interesting to see like outtakes of what all he came up with on the day. Because the stuff that made the movie is like talking about like a mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich and all kinds of weird asides. But yeah, I'd love to see what didn't make the cut. But you're right. The fact that everybody's playing it straight, to the vein of Naked Gun, that's what made that so funny, is these serious actors were pretending like nothing was absurd about what they were doing. And I think that made it work. But yeah, there's a handful of really good performances in this of a lot of newcomers at the time too.
Yeah, the cast it's a perfectly cast movie. Everyone, I can't, and maybe it's because I've seen this a million times, but like I cannot picture anyone else in any of these roles. Like everyone is just so pitch perfectly cast in this. And like no one's trying to do too much. It's like a real ensemble.
And what happened to Cary Elwes? I mean, he's actually so good in this. You'd never know that he was the guy from the first Saw movie. And like, what happened to him? Like, he should have been a heartthrob after this movie.
Yeah, life happened to Cary Elwes, and he never. This was his peak, I think. It's funny because he's really good in Robin Hood Men in Tights, but I don't recall him doing much other comedy. Like everything else he did was more straight drama stuff. And I think like that may be one of the reasons he kind of, fell off a little bit. I mean, he's still a working actor. He's still out there, but like he didn't hit the high highs that I think people expected from him. I think maybe he should have stuck with comedy. I don't really remember kind of where he fell off. I just remember he was the next big thing and then he wasn't. Shawn, do you remember the rise and fall of Cary Elwes?
I think you guys are correct that it's funny that the two kind of comedic movies are the ones that are probably most notable for him. I remember him playing a couple of villain roles. He was in one of those early Kiss the Girls type ones as a villain. And then he, of course, was Saw. But yeah, it's one of those things. We're going to find out like he's been on like a British show, one of those crime dramas or something we just don't know about. But yeah, he's always stayed working. I remember he was in The Crush with Alicia Silverstone when she was first breaking out too.
Friend of Paper Street Pictures, Alicia Silverstone. Show some respect.
Right. Well, let me ask Chris this. Did you expect the film to open on a TV screen of a Commodore 64 video game hardball? And did you actually know there was any wraparound to the movie at all with the real world setting?
No, I had no idea. So, I was not expecting that at all. It was pretty welcome though. It was pretty, I think it was a good wraparound. It had a good couple, cutaway jokes like Back to the Kid. That was pretty good, but no, I was not expecting that at all.
Wait, the Wonder Years in Columbo were here.
I had forgotten that when it came on. I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing that exists in this movie. I do think that does a really good job of kind of setting the tone of the movie and like setting up what kind of a movie it is and like setting up the fantasy aspect in a way that you can kind of get in and out really quickly. I think that does the first 5 minutes does a lot of lifting.
Yeah, because you can understand why I like, if I saw a scene of just from the fairy tale or just one scene as a kid, like, and if you don't know that it's supposed to be funny, if you don't know the tone, like you wouldn't know how to react to the movie. But once you know what it is, I mean, some of the lines, like I think the one line I remember for some reason is when he's telling the story of how he became the pirate, and he's like, and he told me that his name wasn't actually, the pirate, whatever. He said, "My name is Ryan." And for some
That's
reason,
the Dread Pirate Roberts.
yeah. But he's like, just like, my name is Ryan. Just the way he just, and like the way he delivers like just lines like that is just so funny. But if you don't know what the movie is, like you wouldn't know that it's like how funny it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
No, agreed.
That is one of my favorite lines. The when you find out that the Dread Pirate, that whole part where you find out the Dread Pirate Roberts has just been retired for like 15 years living on an island, and people are just like franchising his name, is such a clever gag. Like, oh, I love that scene so much.
Based on a real pirate legend, actually, named Roberts, who the story was that he was living on the legacy name, and like different people were taking over for the fear, the name factor.
Oh wow,
I'll let folks Google or Wikipedia that themselves, but yeah.
Do some work, listener. We're not just going to spoon do everything.
While it's got the real world wraparound, it's funny. The story takes place in these fictional lands of Florin and Gilder. The characters do reference real world spots like Australia and Spain. Inigo's referred to as a Spaniard a few times. And writer William Goldman even wedges in a bit of commentary on the Vietnam War, which I always find funny. Vincini says, you fell for one of the classic blunders, the first being never get involved in a land war in Asia. And I love that stayed in the script, and Rob Reiner put that in the movie.
That's so good.
Just a funny aside.
People love that line, man. People love that line. Yeah. And this was towards the tail end of William Goldman's just crazy run of movies. That guy, I mean, he's written about half the movies in my DVD collection. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men, Marathon Man, Stepford Wives, Misery, and he's probably the greatest screenwriter of all time. And like, it shows based on how good this movie is, but like this movie could not be more different than Misery, could not be more different than Marathon Man. I mean, you're just talking about someone who could write literally anything. You just give him a story and he will write a classic movie. I mean, like that guy is the GOAT, like William Goldman. Respect.
I feel like there's so many good lines of dialogue that like you almost have to watch this movie again, like because you just don't pick up on it. Like the land war in Asia line, it happened so fast, and it was only like once I was playing it back in my mind, and then Cam like said it again out loud, like he quoted it like immediately after it happened. Then I was like, then I got it. It was so funny. I feel like there's so many lines like that you almost have to watch the movie again.
Yeah, it never slows down it never slows down and like lets you get a laugh in. It just keeps going. And so, yeah, there's definitely stuff that I didn't remember. And I've seen this movie 100 times. There's always stuff that I didn't remember. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's all right. I forgot about that. Yeah, there's tons of that stuff. It's so dense. The script is so dense. It's such a smart movie.
Chris even mentioned in the pre-watch that he even knows this to be a quotable movie, even if he doesn't know all the quotes. But to the point about Goldman and some of the actors being so perfect, like Danny DeVito was the first in mind to play Wallace Shawn's character, but like now you can't imagine it not being Wallace Shawn. But the way he screams every line does get stuck in your head for decades, because I still hear him all the time saying things, not just Inconceivable, but some of the other bits. But Inigo repeating the line about what he wants to tell Count Rugen when he finally sees him. And then when he finally does, it's kind of a badass moment where he just keeps repeating it to him as he's about to kill him. But Wesley has amazing line readings. You hear the lady booing the princess in your head.
Yeah.
So, when you go to sleep.
The boo lady. I love the boo lady. That's
Carol Kane coming out of the corner and yelling liar at Billy Crystal. Yeah. Like there's lines like that are just stuck in people's consciousnesses.
And Wallace Shawn, I actually worked with Wallace Shawn probably like 8 or 9 years ago. And a lot of the crew were quoting lines from this movie, but of course I didn't know. I think that's probably the first time I heard the Inconceivable. But every time Wallace Shawn walked by, somebody would say Inconceivable, and he would say it back.
Oh my God!
And
at least he leans into it.
God bless him.
Yeah, and so, but of course I had no idea because I'd never seen the movie, so I had no idea what these people were yelling at him or why. But
you must have felt like a real asshole.
Yeah.
That's rough. This is why, dear listener, you got to watch all the movies, because you might be there one day and Wallace Shawn's standing next to you and you're not understanding the quotes. Chris Paul's been there, but you don't have to be. So watch every movie starting now.
Yeah. Manny Patinkin's also said that he's never left his house and not had the Inigo Montoya line yelled at him. So he's leaned into it too, thankfully. He said he ran into John Gotti and his henchmen one day and they like surrounded him and freaked him out for a second. And then one of the guys just starts quoting Princess Bride to him. So it is very much in the culture.
So, and then you know what's crazy about this? So we talked about Goldman writing the screenplay. But this is actually a novel by William Goldman that was in development hell for like a decade. And, guys, Robert Redford, John Borman, Francois Truffaut, there was a bunch of people who wanted to take a crack at it. And it had so many false starts that Goldman bought the rights to the book back And it was only when Rob Reiner came in and was riding the wave of Spinal Tap and all the good graces of the 20th century, was finally like, fine, if you want to do it, you could do it. So Rob Reiner kind of brought it back from the dead. I think Goldman had kind of given up hope on it. And so one of the many things we can thank Rob Reiner for is not just directing this, but also that it exists. Otherwise, it may have languished as a novel forever. And not a particularly popular one either, which is kind of weird, given that the movie's so popular.
Yeah, the novel itself, he said he wrote for his daughters. He said, what do you want to be about? One said a princess, one said a bride. And that's what hatched the idea for him. But it's interesting because the book itself has a metafiction about it, where there is a wraparound as well with the real world stuff. And S. Morgenstern is not a real author. The book itself has annotations by Goldman as a joke, like he's annotating a fictional book. So when you read the novel, it's kind of interesting where he jumps in and annotates, like, we're going to skip over this entire lineage of the kings. It's kind of boring. So like he'll have in jokes on the sides of the book if you ever.
Wait, have you read the book?
I have, yeah.
Wow, Shawn Talley.
Long time ago, yeah.
You were so learned. I had no idea.
Did you read the book to prepare for this podcast? Because that would be
No. This movie is one of those, like, I know on our other podcast, we'll ask folks sometimes in our rapid fire section, like, what's a movie you've seen the most in your life? And if I was to truly answer that, I would say like Batman 89, the 90 Ninja Turtles movie, Princess Bride, maybe Monty Python, the Holy Grail, are ones like I know I've seen like over and over, the kind that I like wore out a VHS tape of. But yeah, so I was a big enough fan that I did. Somebody gifted me the book and I did read it.
Wow. You don't get that from other podcast people. This is the deep dive that Shawn Talley's willing to do for you.
I mean, it hits some sweet spots of like the kind of movies we were watching in the 80s, the genre stuff. And, you know, I was all into sword fighting and stuff like that, for like every kid was for a minute, just like dinosaurs and other things. But to the point about the fighting, the fencing duel between the Man in Black and Inigo is actually pretty iconic. And they the fact that they begin like toying with each other and using their non-dominant hand before they call out each other's fight methods, which as a kid, I thought they were speaking Latin to each other. I didn't have a clue what the hell they were saying, but they're actually calling out like legitimate sword fight defense methods to each other in that one middle kind of section of the fight. But famously, like, there's not a single stunt person in those shots. He shot it wide. You could tell it's them like 100% of the time. And I know they trained rigorously for it for weeks. And also Bob Anderson, if anybody knows that name, he kind of was the go-to swordplay choreographer guy for decades. He did Darth Vader's stunt double in the Star Wars sequels. He did the Star Wars fights, you know, the Highlander, Mask of Zorro, trained Johnny Depp all the way back to Errol Flynn to use swords. So yeah, he was like the go-to guy. And this one just still ranks among like the great sword fights, I think, on camera ever.
It's actually pretty good. Like I was also surprised. It was going to be another thing I was going to mention was like that first sword fight. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Like this is like a real sword fight. Like it's not really played for laughs. I mean, it is funny, but it is like a really well choreographed scene.
Yeah, I think that scene really sets the tone kind of for what the movie is going to be, where it's like it is a comedy, but it's also trying to be good. Like it's not just out here trying to make people laugh, and no one, like, these guys clearly worked on this for a long time to make the sword fighting look right and to make the horseback ride. Like they were making a great movie that also happened to be a comedy, and like you can feel that in how good a lot of that stuff like that is. It's I love it. And also, can we talk about how Christopher Guest? I had completely forgotten for somehow that Christopher Guest is the what's his name?
The six-fingered man.
Yeah, the six-fingered man. Rugen. I like completely forgot Christopher Guest was in that, and we can thank him for probably some movies that we're going to get on this podcast at some point, like Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman. Like that guy created a whole genre after this. Like he is,
well, with Rob Reiner initially, because Spinal Tap was the first one of that, Reiner's first feature, and that started Guest's kind of career with that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, there's just so many like little roles that are just made so interesting. Like there is no throwaway role in this. Like even the small roles, they do something to make them interesting. And he's one of those guys, like you just see it all the time with the guy. What's the guy, the albino guy that lives in the pit of despair?
Yeah,
like that could have been such a throwaway character, but they just make everybody so weird and kooky.
I mean, Inigo is the best character, like the Spaniard. I mean, like I was not expecting. Well, first of all, I wasn't expecting them to team up, and then I also wasn't expecting his character arc to be so fulfilled in the end. Like just like what a great scene at the end, and like there's that whole revenge arc. Sort of comes out of nowhere, but I was here for it.
Yeah. Also, Chris Sarandon as the prince in this is like so epically awful. Like his character is so great. He's like such a scumbag. I love it. He like plays it up to 11. I just think that character is so memorable. Like Chris Sarandon's done a lot of really good stuff, but like this is the big thing for him that I always remember. He is so good in that role of the prince, just being like a complete ass, like just like savoring being an asshole. I think that's what makes him so funny. Is like you can tell he's just so happy to be an asshole.
I love him in this and Fright Night. And I will say he played such a smarmy weasel in this that it kind of hurt people's opinion of him as a sex symbol afterwards, because he's so like slimy in this and such a coward that it's hard for people to take him seriously. But like Chris Sarandon, who is the ex-husband of Susan Sarandon, you keep saying his name a little differently, which is weird. But
wait, I didn't know they were married. Is that true?
Yeah, she kept his name. Yeah, she kept his name for her whole career. Yeah, I thought when I was a kid that they were siblings. And then I found out later, like, oh no, they're ex-spouses. She just kept the name. But yeah.
I thought they were no relation. I didn't.
Well, now you can say his name properly.
Well, Sarandon, Chris Sarandon. Yeah, I've always called him Chris Sarandon, I think.
Nope, just like Susan.
All right, well, we've got a lot to work on here. I'm going to work on that. Chris Sarandon. But yeah, he was so good in this that people, I think, just assume he's an asshole.
Even Robin Wright had a couple good lines. The one I remember is towards the end when she's talking to the old guy, and she says like, you know, I'm going to be wed tonight, but I'm going to kill myself tomorrow or something like it. And the way she just says it again, so straight, and it's just like a throwaway line. Like I think Cam, you probably heard me. I laughed out loud when she said that.
And the old father of Humperdinck too was just like, won't that be nice? He says something like dismissive as she says it, like he clearly didn't even comprehend what she just said.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the king, wasn't it? That's the main dude. That's the king.
That's right. Yeah.
I love that he had just no reaction to it. It was so good. I love this movie so much. I could just sit here and talk about different lines from the movie and just like so many great lines. Shawn, what's your favorite line from this? I know you're not the guest, but what's your favorite line from this movie? Like you only get one.
Because I'm recently watching, it was toward the end of the movie, so it's stuck in my brain more. But one of the all-timer lines that you forget about that should be quoted more is when she does go to kill herself, Wesley from the bed goes, startling her, goes, "There's a shortage of perfect breasts in this world. It'd be a pity to damage yours."
Oh, that was a good one. That was a line that was a line I didn't really remember. It's not like a notable line, but it is really good.
I will tell you one I quote often, probably too often, that does stick in my brain, though, is him going, "Life is pain. Anyone who says otherwise is selling something." I may quote that to my children when they complain.
I love when Humperdinck is like, "I've got my country's 500th anniversary to plan, a wedding to arrange, my wife to murder, and Gilder to blame for it. I'm pretty swamped here." I love that line.
That was good.
Everything about that line is great. I mean, Inigo Montoya. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die is like the most famous line from this movie, but like, there's just so many good ones.
The Dread Pirate Roberts, and when he's like, my name is not actually Dread Pirate Roberts. My name is Ryan. Like that for some reason it was I think my favorite.
Well, that's just a perfect name. Like you could spend days trying to come up with a perfect name for that joke, and Ryan is it. Like it's just, there's no funnier thing to say in that. Like Ryan is just such the perfect name for, I don't even know why. But yeah, that's a laugh out line for me every single time. I love everything about the fact that the Dread Pirate Roberts is not the actual Dread Pirate Roberts, and people are just like outsourcing his name. It cracks me up all the time.
I feel like a modern movie would spend 15 minutes on like backstory showing all that. I kind of love that they leave a good bit of that to the imagination. You know, he went off, became a pirate, studied incredibly well, and like got great at swordplay and stuff. But like, we don't need to see that. I think a modern movie would like actually spend 20 minutes on that.
And I think the best like visual gag was when you first see them climbing the rope, like when everyone straps themselves to Andre the Giant, and just the way that they're just climbing the rope with just their arms is such a great visual gag.
Yeah, and I love when Wallace Shawn's getting mad at Andre the Giant because what's his name's he's catching up to them, and he's like, "Well, I am carrying 3 people."
You were supposed to be this giant. Yeah, he's like nose to nose shit talking him while he's carrying them up.
Yeah, Wallace Shawn is, every minute he's on screen is dynamite. Like it's a shit. I don't know if you could do a whole movie of him doing that shtick, but like everything he does in that movie is so good. That like that character's so memorable. Everything he says is a quote. Like I don't think he gets enough credit in that role for just how freaking good he is. Like he is so good in that.
Yeah, his
Also,
squeal has become so iconic that anytime you hear it now, like in Toy Story, he plays the dinosaur and other stuff, you just like, oh, there's Wallace Shawn. He's got the cadence that everybody recognizes instantly.
also, can we talk about the fact that Rob Reiner is the greatest filmmaker no one ever talks about? This guy has made, in an 8-year span, he made nothing but fire. He made Spinal Tap, The Sure Thing, Stand By Me, Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men. Back to back to back to back to back. Like, had Spielberg done that, people would talk about that every day. And like, no one talks about Rob Reiner as a great director, but like every one of those movies is an absolute classic, except maybe The Sure Thing, which is still a good movie. Every one of those, Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men, you could do every one of those on this show. Like that's how big those movies are. In fact, we're going to do Misery here in a couple episodes, so spoiler warning on that. Because Sean Talley has not seen Misery.
It's true.
For sure.
Oh, so you're turning the tables, hey?
Yeah.
I think in the wintertime here, both Cameron and I are going to present one we've not seen as a twist where we'll have a guest host and one of us will be the quote unquote guest.
Yeah. So you heard it here first. Chris Paul, breaking news.
And what's the movie that Cameron hasn't seen? That's what I want to know.
It's well, am I allowed to say, Shawn? Or
you don't want to spoil it.
I let the cat out of the bag on Misery. I feel like I can say mine is Love Actually.
Okay, classic.
We're gonna do that. We're gonna do that one over Christmas time, and we're gonna do Misery over Halloween. So unless we don't, because you know what, this isn't binding. So if we don't do it, sorry, we got bored or did something else.
I will say, yes, he had one of the great starts of all time. There's no doubt. I do. Right after A Few Good Men, he did North, and then a lot of movies kind of fell off after that. Yeah. So I do think that's why. But yeah, as an opening, like several movies, that's Coppola, Sidney Lumet level of like just classic after another.
No one talks about him
in different genres, no less.
Yeah, no one talks about him being a great director. But that's like 6 absolute masterpieces. Like that's 6 classics. Like who has that? And I mean, you can count on one hand the amount of filmmakers who have 6 movies that good. Like it's kind of crazy that we take Rob Reiner for granted, man. Like I apologize to Rob because I take him for granted. But when you see that, like, I mean, there's just not many people that have that resume. It's crazy.
I mean, he's got like a top 5, arguably the first major mockumentary type comedy. Stand By Me, one of the great coming-of-age movies. Princess Bride, kind of a weird hybrid of a romance and an adventure movie. Harry Met Sally, one of the great rom-coms. A Few Good Men, one of the great courtroom dramas. So yeah, he's nailed across genres an iconic.
Well, I think that's part of the reason he's taken for granted is because he doesn't, like, his style is that he doesn't have a style. He's like an elite studio director. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't. Yeah. You don't watch a movie and think, oh, this is a Quentin Tarantino movie. Like. It's not like that with Rob Reiner. You watch it and you go, oh, Rob Reiner, that makes sense. But like nothing about the movie leads you to believe Rob Reiner made it. So I think people take him for granted. But man, that dude is just like fire.
I just want to say, I hope that nobody attempts to remake this movie. I was just thinking about, as you were saying that, because Rob Reiner's done so many classics that I'm sure people will try and remake. But like this one, I just don't even think you could. Like, I don't even think. There's nothing about it. Like it's because it was made when it was, like, nothing about it would translate as well.
Yeah, so there's 2 things that I think when anytime anybody remakes anything, one is, does it have a thing that you can do differently? Like, is there a way to take, and this one, it's just like, unless you just got real creative with it, like you'd just be making an inferior version of the same thing. I don't like, there's nothing you can do to update it or modernize it or whatever. And then like, this also has a very specific tone that I think anytime you remake a classic with a really specific tone, you fuck it up. Like it's why the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory remake didn't work, because you're never going to match that weird tone that first one had. That's lightning in a bottle stuff. And I think this is the same thing. If they were going to do anything, if someone came to me and said like, hey, you want to make a Princess Bride movie? What I would make would be a movie about the 5 years he's gone, and go in and do something interesting with that and just see how he went from like the farmhand to, the Dread Pirate Roberts. I think there's an interesting movie in that. But yeah, God, please don't remake that. Like nothing good comes of remaking The Princess Bride. It would not work.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past anybody. I'm hoping that Goldman and family and Reiner, whoever, might have some rights where they would not allow it, you would hope. Because things like Back to the Future still haven't been done. It's not to say that they won't in our lifetime, but there is something unique about the family-friendly kind of mid-'80s movie that this gets lumped in with things like Labyrinth and Neverending Story and Goonies and stuff like that. And to date, none of those have really gotten a full, proper remake, and I think it's for the better. If anything, I know Goonies had talks of like a continuation style movie, a legacy sequel. I'd always rather that happen than completely like repurposing a movie.
Well, it's also a genre that's kind of dead now. Like, you're just not seeing these, like, I mean, we did The Mummy last episode. It's kind of the same thing. You're not really seeing these adventure movies get made, really. I mean, I guess you could lump Princess Bride in with like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, because that stuff gets made. But this, like, this just isn't a kind of movie that studios are even trying to make right now. And it was, surprisingly, it was only the 35th highest grossing movie of the year 1987. So maybe that's why they're not trying to reboot it, because it made less money than the Mark Harmon classic Summer School.
Directed by Rob's father, Carl, no less.
Oh, that's true. It was a big year for the Reiners. Made less money than Dragnet. Made less money than Mannequin. It made less money than Like Father, Like Son. So yeah, it's crazy it didn't do that well. It only made a little over $30 million at the box office. So
87's a crazy year. We've talked about all the good genre stuff that came out that year. Predator hit the top 10, among other things. But yeah, this movie very much found its footprint on home video. This was one of the huge VHS, like this movie became circulated so much. Like we talked about, there's shirts with quotes on it in Walmart and Target nowadays. So yeah, like it is very much one of the ones home video turned into a, everyone has seen classic, including Chris Ball now.
That's right.
Years later.
Chris Ball was there.
I'm honored.
Chris Ball was there at the theater in 1987, but instead he watched Roxanne and Mannequin. It was a decision that had to be made. Chris, you probably wouldn't have been alive in 87.
I was about to say, was Chris alive in 1987?
I don't want to know the answer to that. Probably not.
You know the answer to that, and the answer is no.
Hate you. Ugh, you kids and your rock and roll music, and you're never seeing movies. You didn't see this because it wasn't on Instagram or TikTok, probably.
Okay. Now Cam's just
get off my lawn.
Doing hacky young people jokes. You Gen Zs.
Yeah.
And your flip. Chris, you did say like you were rather charmed by it despite Cameron mumbling stuff in the corner and like quoting it. I think watching it too, like we talk about modern lenses and stuff, and really in the weirdest way, it's not as problematic as so many 80s movies overall. I mean, there's a time or two where you're like, oh, that might not fly today, but you don't watch this like cringing the way you do at certain Revenge of the Nerds and other movies where it's like crazy rich stuff playing out.
Revenge of the Nerds has some bad shit.
It's like Carrie Elwes' line where he's like, "There's a shortage of good breasts." That I don't know if that line probably wouldn't fly, but even then, it's like even then there is still something so charming and magical about the movie. You're right. I think it holds up well. Like even if I watched it, like even if I discovered it without the context of this podcast, I think I would still love it.
Yeah, like I said, among Back to the Future and that ilk, it's one of the few ones that you can show people cold with no baggage, no anything, and like, oh, they'll take to it more. And I think the legacy of this movie is shown. Like, it's generational now. Kids are watching it still. It's on Disney Plus. I'm sure people are still showing their kids the movie, but I do think it holds up so much better than certain ones like Neverending Story and others that either the effects are dated or some of the story stuff are kind of wonky. But yeah, this one to me is up there close to Back to the Future. And like you can show somebody this from all walks of life and they'll be charmed by it in some capacity.
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect 4-quadrant movie. Like I don't know who I know in the world that wouldn't like this movie. Like it just, my 80-year-old grandmother and my 10-year-old niece and, my new movie BFF Chris Ball, I like everyone I know is going to like this movie. Like there's just no one it doesn't hit for. It just works.
But Chris, to that point, is there anything that jumped out at you as just like, oh God, that was not great, or anything that made you think of something else as far as it being derivative or something? I know you mentioned it turned out to be much more of a real movie than you were thinking, and not a camp parody classic. Yeah, no, there was nothing that really. Like there was nothing that I hated. Like it was very like there was not really. I pretty much loved all of it. I don't think there was a single moment that was cringe or that was like, oh, that doesn't really hold up. Like even like the line with the breasts is kind of like, all right, that's that's a very 80s line. But I think that was probably the only time that I thought that, where I was like, okay, that's like that's probably the one thing where you're like, all right, that's that's the 80s talking. But other than that, I think everything was pretty timeless, I think is the best way to describe the movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. The time.
Fred Savage yelling at his granddad was more hurtful than some of the other stuff in the movie. When he's still in the mask before the As You Wish reveal, he does raise his hand at her, but I don't think he was ever going to actually strike her, obviously, because he had not yet shown her that he is her true love. But even the line we keep talking about where he mentions that hers are very nice, he's telling that to his true love. I don't think that's too crazy. Couples allowed to be horny with each other.
That's right. Let's bring back the horny in Princess Bride. Come on. That's the remake, Chris. The horny version of Princess Bride.
Yeah, and then even like when the eels show up, like, and like even like those effects were, I remember thinking like, oh, like this is like pretty good. Like they're shooting in the water. They've got like animatronic eels. Like I remember like sort of being surprised at how like good the choreography was and sort of how good the effects were, because it could have been so camp. Like, I mean, it is camp, but you know what I mean? Like the effects could have been bad and dated the movie, but because they're not, because they played it straight and committed to making the effects good and the choreography good and the performances good, like that's sort of what keeps everything timeless.
Yeah, I love the I can't remember what the acronym for him is, but the giant rat in the
ROUSs.
ROUS.
Rodents of unusual size.
Oh, that line is the timing of that gag is perfect. And that I love that creature looks great still. Like there's no, they did it right. They did it all practical. They did it. You could tell care was put into that stuff. It's just a really good, well-made movie with really good actors and a really good filmmaker and a really good writer. It's almost like if you take a world-class director or a world-class writer and you give them really good actors, they can make something really good. And then they found Robin Wright, who was not a thing apparently before this movie. She got the always popular end introducing credit at the end of the movie. But yeah, she beat out a lot of people. Meg Ryan, Uma Thurman. That was one of those roles where they kind of turned over every rock and ended up with Forrest Gump's future love interest, Robin Wright. And
don't call Sean Penn Forrest Gump.
Oh, ouch! That's you. That's you. That's Sean Talley going at Sean Penn, not me. Not me.
Oh no, he was I Am Sam. Sorry, wrong guy. Who was no? I can't quote the Tropic Thunder bit, but you all know it. It's
yes, you can't.
No, you cannot. But yeah, that was one of those like hundreds and hundreds of women tried out for this role because it was a well-known project. And yeah, every name we probably have ever heard of in the 80s was somebody who auditioned. You mentioned a couple. I know Courtney Cox and others were among that too. But yeah, they landed on a newbie, and she's great in it.
Yeah, and it's sort of it's a testament to her because it's the role is so. I mean, you're the princess, it's the damsel in distress. The entire movie is about her being rescued, and yet she still found a couple really good lines, like the one I mentioned at the end where she just says, "I'm going to kill myself tomorrow," and I mean, in the hands of anyone else, I mean, you can't imagine it being anyone else.
Yeah, she's like the straight man in the movie. Like everyone else is doing gags around her and doing all this showy stuff, but she's kind of the heart of the movie and the person that kind of holds it together while everyone else is like doing their thing. It's kind of a thankless role, but yeah, she's one of the great female performers of that whole period. So Rob Reiner was right on that one.
We've mentioned a handful of memorable lines, and I think if Chris ever revisits it, yeah, he'll even pick up a few more that may, like we said, it kind of flies past a few and doesn't really let anything breathe. Not in a bad way, just like movie just keeps going. But one of the things that's not necessarily quotable, but I love Wesley's whole to the pain speech that he gives Humperdinck from the bed, where he like basically threatens to turn him into this limbless, tongueless, hideous vegetable of a human being.
Yeah,
so that one always sticks out to me too.
I knew he was bluffing. So yeah. Good. So good.
Mr. Sarandan, also with a great line there.
Chris Sarandon. Did I get it? That's right?
Yeah. Say it like you'd say Susan's name.
Chris Sarandon. Oh, God.
Jeez.
This is Philip Guzman all over again. This is... I'm learning new names.
Speaking of Phil, every time we do one of these, our guest ends up revealing they have way bigger blind spots we didn't know about. So we are glad you saw this. We're glad you took to it, Chris, for the most part. You enjoyed yourself despite, being in the same vicinity as Cameron Burns. But do you have any other blind spots in maybe like the adventure genre, the 80s family-friendly 4-quadrant genre, any other larger blind spots in general?
Yeah, I told Cameron this, but I've never seen The Godfather. But I was like, Cameron and I, because we're both up, we're working on this series together. We were like, neither of us has time to sit down and watch The Godfather. So that would be
that's a little bigger commitment. I agree.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a big one. That's one of the bigger blind spots. What else you got, Chris? Any other big ones?
No, I think that's it. Like we went through the list, and I think it was really it's really that and The Godfather. And I'm glad I watched this, because now I don't have to feel as left out with my friends. If I ever work with any of the actors, I can shout lines at them. I can be involved. So yeah. So thank you.
Also, a little bit of trivia: Chris had also not seen Footloose before, and he actually watched Footloose with me in Canada to prep for the Phil Guzman episode where we watched Footloose. So Chris is getting all the blind spots revealed. Yeah, he also liked Footloose.
That's right. Yeah, so, Footloose is great.
Yeah, so we're really he's doing the Lord's work on filling in these blind spots.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah,
no, so certainly we're glad you saw it.
So before we let you go, anything you want to plug? Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to sell to the people?
Well, Cameron and I just wrapped this series. That'll be pretty fun, because I got to plug that, because now Cameron and I are BFFs. But also, you'd catch our movies on Shudder. Influencer just came out on Shudder. My bestie's other movie that we're hopefully gonna make a sequel to. So yeah, that's that.
And yeah, you got a bunch of stuff on Shudder that people can see. Anything else you want to sell before we send you on your way?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, catch our movies on Shudder. Got another one called Body Cam that'll be coming out sometime next year. So just keep an eye out. Love doing horror movies, and hopefully Cam and I can do one together soon.
I'm excited for that. I'm also excited for Body Cam, directed by my mom's favorite filmmaker and Paper Street friend, Brandon Christensen. So yeah, keep an eye on that one. And Chris, thanks for coming and doing this, and I'll see you when we log off, because you're in the room next to me. So
we'll be working with Chris again on something in the future, no doubt.
100%.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, Chris. Our thanks again to Chris Ball. This movie, Princess Bride, is one, again, Cameron and I have talked about just being a favorite amongst ourselves. Most everyone we know, it is a favorite. And to your point, it is a movie that, I remember watching with my grandparents. Older folks loved it. Kids loved it. Kids are still finding it and loving it nowadays. It is truly one of the few universally beloved movies in that Casablanca kind of vein, where it's hard to find somebody who doesn't like it. And when you do find that person, you smack them around and tell them, you're the bad one. You're the minority here. Something's wrong with you.
You turn him up to 50. You go right to 50 on the pain meter with that guy.
And make him let out a very horrific bellow across the land that even...
The good news is he'll only be mostly dead.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that he didn't react well to the Billy Crystal at all, because it's true. It is the one little slapsticky bit, and then otherwise everyone playing it straight.
Yeah. It feels like for a second the movie becomes like a Saturday Night Live sketch when he's on, and then once he's gone, it's back to being it's funny. I like it, but I can see how it would pull people out of the movie. So it doesn't totally shock me. It definitely feels of another movie, but it is funny.
I don't feel it's any more out of place though than the freaking guy that's marrying them comes out with the weirdest voice of all time. That's another line people say. Yeah, that blessed arrangement.
Yeah, that's the thing. The movie does that. It's just it doesn't have any throwaway roles. They're just oh, this is a throwaway role. Let's do something. Let's make them weird. I could do without that. I don't need it, but it is memorable. So
that's true. Yeah, it keeps it in that tonal kind of goofiness. Yeah. But I do think it's part of its charm too, the comedy.
Yeah, who are we to doubt Rob Reiner, the greatest living filmmaker? No, but close. He's up there. But yeah, no, it just all to your point. It just all works. Everything about this movie works. Like you said, there's no. Everyone there, you can find someone on the internet to hate anything. I don't know that I've ever found someone that hates Princess Bride. So it might be the last thing in the world that doesn't have a hater. So let's cling to that for as long as we can.
Yeah, we'll find them. They're out there because, if anything, Twitter will show you that if someone hates every sacred cow you think exists.
It's true.
And until that day, let's not ignore them. Like I said, let's put them in the pit of despair.
That's right.
But yeah, like Count Rugen, we will abruptly run away, which is always the thing I laugh at in movies, like when Ray Fiennes did that in Grand Budapest Hotel, when he goes to face off with Inigo and just bolts.
So good.
Cameron and I are about to do that in the same way. We want to thank Chris Ball again for joining us. He was late to the party, but we are glad he got here. I assume everybody listening to this one has seen this movie. Like I said, maybe one of the most ubiquitous movies of our lifetimes that people have seen. So if this helped you to or reinvigorated you to maybe give it a rewatch or something cool, thank you all for listening. For Cameron Burns, I am Shawn Talley. This has been a presentation of the Paper Street Podcast. Don't be late to the party.
Bye, everybody.